So I only got 8 minutes, so I better get started. So because I should in 8 minutes tell you about Kratom. So Kratom is Southeast Asian plant medicine used for a variety of reasons. So first of all, Kratom Mitragyna speciosa is a plant from Southeast Asia. Its alkaloids, particularly mitragynine, and their metabolites, which develop in our human body, trigger complex polypharmacology. The bitter leaves are usually either taken orally fresh, dried for tea, or particularly in Europe, quite common, or in the US, as a ground powder for suspensions. There is traditional use, for example, in Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And traditionally, it has been used as an opium substitute. Nowadays, it's kind of all kind of drug substitute. And also against pain, diarrhea, and other ailments. The first description in the West was by Dutch botanist Korthals in 1839. And yeah, this is how the leaves look like, particularly the ground powder in the middle is the most common dosage form. So mitragynine is the most abundant alkaloid with approximately 1% in the dry matter. This is how this little fellow looks like. Itself, it's only a very weak opioid, and has also other effects like serotonergic, adrenergic, adenosinergic, dopaminergic, etc. The main metabolite, 7-hydroxymitragynine, and its rearrangement product, they act as rather potent mu-opioid agonists. So they have, let's say, proper opioid effects. This is how this molecule and the rearrangement product look like. And yeah, I won't go into details about the positive and the negative effects, the short term and the long term. There is an opioid leitmotif. But important is that the safety profile of Kratom is not perfect, of course, because it's still an opioid, but much better than other opioids, particularly when it comes to the most harmful effect, which is ODing on respiratory depression. Here, at least traditional Kratom products seem to be sufficiently safe. Typically, at one occasion, 1 to maximum 5 grams are used, but of course, if you have a significant tolerance, doses can be actually quite high. Based on oral use and this metabolization which needs to go on, it's typically a rather slow onset and with a duration up to 6 hours, plus minus 2 hours. It's a bit difficult to say because the effects are also sometimes quite subtle. The different chemovars, potheads would say strains, but also plant age and the fermentation of the product, they are quite relevant when it comes to the alkaloid composition of the material. And it has less to do with the vein color, which is a kind of very often by vendors communicated narrative. So lethal overdoses, which associated with Kratom, occur rarely, but they do occur. But if they occur, they are typically associated with either potent extracts, so not the traditional plant material, or with adulterated material. For example, there were cases with the synthetic opioid ODSMT, or in most cases, polysubstance use. That means the person had multiple drugs, for example, fentanyl or heroin in their blood, or its metabolites. So there is a recent increase in use prevalence, and there is several data linking this. I won't go through this. Make a picture if you want, but I mean there is sufficient evidence based on studies, based on sales data, but also based on media documentation that we can say that it's becoming more relevant. So this is also the reason why we need a regulation. But first of all, have a quick look at what individual countries of relevance, what kind of positions they have. For example, Thailand. They banned it in the 40s, they re-legalized it rather recent, and now they have a little regulatory framework. Indonesia, which is currently the main cultivating and manufacturing country, they are currently planning for having proper specifications for Kratom, but also some type of licensing system. And also rather recent, the WHO, the ECDD, they were looking into Kratom, and there was a conclusion to not review, which basically means not to ban Kratom, at least for now. And of course they were referring to the natural Kratom, so not any derivatives or extracts. Currently quite interesting, and we will hear later on in this panel more about this. The Czech Republic is aiming to fully regulate the market for Kratom as of 2025. Confident nodding? Yes. In general, there are regulatory deficits. We have a lot of regulations about food. We have a lot of regulations about pharmaceuticals. But in between, there are a lot of substances, drugs, plant materials, however you want to call it, which are somewhere in between. But there's this huge gap. There's only this little bluish box there. I put it in there for tobacco. But we pretend that alcohol is food. We pretend that caffeine is food. Not really. We pretend that cannabis is a very potent drug which needs to be in the narcotic schedule. Ideally, there would be a proper regulatory framework in each and every country where at least these substances go into. And because it's so difficult, I come from Germany, it's so difficult if you have once a compound scheduled as narcotic, getting it back into a sensible regulation. So starting with substances which are not officially banned narcotics is a very smart approach. And and in this publication you can read more about this, and of course with the following talks. So thank you very much.